I'm Tae Kim. I'm currently employed at Asia Research Institute and Seoul National University. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Professor Kang Ho-jae for providing me with this opportunity to lecture. The topic I will be presenting today is the urban planning and spatial changes in Pyongyang from 1937 to 1960. My lecture begins with the setting of 1937, which marked the colonial period in Korea. I will elaborate on the significance of this time period throughout the course of the lecture. What comes to mind when you think of Pyongyang? You might think of Kim Il-sung Square and mass military parade and the regime of Kim Jong-un. On the other hand, what images come to mind when you think of Seoul? In fact, there is only about 60 years difference in the appearance of Seoul and Pyongyang. Today's lecture will examine the beginning of the difference between Seoul and Pyongyang. Before the lecture, let's first take a look at the city structure of Pyongyang. Pyongyang is mainly divided by the Taedong River. This one is Taedong River, and this one is Botong River. And most Pyongyang's tourist courses are focused on the Taedong River in this way. The area currently highlighted in pink can be considered as the new city of Pyongyang. For example, this one is 미래과학자 Street, and then this one is Yeomyeong Street, and then this one is Gwangbok Street, and then this one is 통일 Street. If we zoom in on highlight area, we can see the landmark of Pyongyang. In the section known as Central Pyongyang, we can find the Kim Il-sung Square and then Juche Tower and other significant landmark. Pyongyang is characterized by four prominent landmarks forming two axes, which we are like to encounter first when visiting the city. The first axis comprise Kim Il-sung Square and Juche Tower. This one and this one. While the second axis consists of Mansu Hill Grand Monument and the Tower of the Party Founding. This one is Tower of the Party Founding, and then this one is Mansu Grand Monument. In the Kim Il-sung Square was completed in 1950s, while the rest of the facilities began construction in the 1980s. In today's lecture, we will delve deep into how Kim Il-sung Square and its surrounding were developed and examine in detail how the urban landscape of North Korea and Seoul diverged over time. Now let's begin the lecture. Much like Seoul in Korea urban studies, Pyongyang holds significant importance in North Korea urban research. However, previous studies have largely approached the subject from the perspective of socialist urban theory. Since the founding of North Korea, moreover, there has been disconnect between research on Pyongyang in the modern historic context and research on Pyongyang in the contemporary context. Consequently, existing studies have mainly emphasized the uniqueness of North Korea's society from the perspective or socialist urban theory. Studies that emphasize the socialist regime typically operate on the premise of two main myths. One is that after liberation, Pyongyang as constructed by North Korea was fundamentally recognized under the banner of socialism. The second myth suggests that Pyongyang was pulverized during the Korean War by US bombing, leading to its complete devastation, upon which a new urban planning process was undertaken on the blank slate of the city. This second argument, stemming from the myth of the completely destroyed Pyongyang, interprets the reconstruction of Pyongyang before and after the war as the construction of the ideal socialist city. Both these premises support the perspective that socialist city equal Pyongyang and are generally accepted without significant dissent in academia. However, history inevitably exhibits both discontinuity and continuity. Particularly, urban space acts as repositories where various images crafted by history accumulate. Therefore, the elements constituting a city leave trace in each era. What to preserve and what to erase. What memories to overlay onto the space are decisions determined by the concerns of the dominant power controlling the space. In the other words, the outcomes of modern urban planning have left a diverse legacy of only after liberation, but also since the Korean War and up to the present day. Therefore, I aimed to consider the two myths mentioned earlier and explore the changes in the spatial structure and urban identified of Pyongyang with the flow of history. Rather than adopting a deterministic interpretation of Pyongyang as the socialist city, I sought to examine the spatial characteristic of Pyongyang that, emerging from the interaction between space, governing power, and historical context, withholding conclusive judgment. To analyze such content, the primary material can be sourced from the North Korea Information Center in South Korea, with the main focus on material from the 노동신문. However, due to difficulty of obtain architecture-related data with South Korea, most of information would need to gathered from Lenin Library in Moscow, Russia, or correct abroad. Pyongyang is known as a socialist city. So what exactly is a socialist city? It's worth considering this while attending the lecture, especially since there are claims that in the past, East Berlin in Germany was subject to socialist urban planning. The question of whether a socialist city truly exists has been a long-standing issue in socialist urban study since the 1960s. From the Cold War era to the post-Cold War period, this question has been continuously debated. The common theme in these debates revolved around the question of what is the specificity of the socialist city, and does such specificity actually exist? However, due to the diverse categorization and methodologies used by scholars to define specificity, a clear consensus has yet to emerge. In the context, research on Pyongyang continues with the framework of it being a socialist city. However, in the field of North Korea studies, research accumulation is very limited due to constraints in assessing data. Moreover, the research that those exist tend to focus predominantly on politics, economics, and wartime history, with a concentration on the period between 1945 and 1950. Contrary to the scarcity of research in the field of North Korea studies, research on Pyongyang began with a focus on urban planning and architecture. In the late 1990s, scholars in North Korean studies sought to move away from the predominant focus on politics, economics, and military affairs. Instead, they introduced new research methods to shift attention toward space or the spatial aspect of North Korea, aiming to break away from traditional frameworks and explore new dimensions of analysis. Today's lecture is divided into three main periods, examining the change in the space resulting from historical events. One is the liberation, two is the Korean War, and three is post-war reconstruction. Based on the critical juncture of these three history events, we analyzed how the continuity and discontinuity in Pyongyang manifest, and how the spatial characteristics of Pyongyang evolve over time. Chapter 2, we will critically reassess the dominantly socialist city theory prevalent in existing Pyongyang studies. Unlike North Korea official historical narrative, we will explore the strong continuity with colonialism evidence. In Pyongyang's urban planning immediately after liberation, to analyze this, the chapter will focus on examining the urban planning in Pyongyang up to the Korean War, starting from the introduction of modern urban planning with the Pyongyang City Planning in 1937. This will provide insight into the human, spatial, and developmental aspect of Pyongyang during this period. In comparison to Keijo, aka Seoul, Pyongyang, despite being an important city in the west region, had a relatively narrow administrative area and lacked sufficient urban infrastructure. Since the 1920s, There were concerns about housing shortage, flooding from the Taedong River, and demand for the expansion of the suburban area. How these demands were not effectively addressed until the enactment of the Joseon City Planning Order in Pyongyang in 1937. With the introduction of the Pyongyang City Plan, which includes the expansion of suburban area and addressed urban infrastructure and housing shortage, it seems that the grievance of the residents were being addressed. However, with the outbreak of the Pacific War and the emergency of region and national planning theories, the planned land recognition was halted. In the 1940s, urban planning efforts were hindered by various challenges such as the mobilization of labor under the colonial regime and budget constraints, resulting in the plan not being implemented as intended. With Japan's defeat in 1945 and Korean liberation, Pyongyang's urban planning, which remained incomplete during the Japanese colonial era, fell under responsibility of the newly established North Korean government. Immediately after liberation, North Korea actively utilized the colonial legacy that remained in Pyongyang. However, despite advocating for the complete break from the colonial era, North Korea emphasized the term democratic to secure legitimacy for governance, conducting urban redevelopment project under the banner of the People Democratic Revolution. The type of colonial legacies utilized by North Korea can be divided into three categories. First, in terms of personal, North Korea utilized the concept of oren intelli, means past intelli, affecting a shortage of scientific and technological expertise immediately after liberation. North Korea relied on a neutral discourse of science and technology, appointing individuals who had worked for the colonial administration or were from landlord background to high-ranking positions and utilizing their expertise. Secondly, from the perspective of urban planning, the unfinished plan from the Japanese colonial era were continued after the deletion of their origin copyright. In term of business and labor mobilization, they were not significantly different from those the colonial period. However, under the guise of constructing a democratic city for the people, these projects were able to be completed without major opposition. Third, in the utilization of spatial heritage, while inheriting the identity of the colonial era space, if efforts were made to replace the trace of the past with present political ideology, thereby constructing regional identity in a new way. In Chapter 3, we revisit the exact fact of Pyongyang's complete destruction and analyzed the bombing by the U.S. Air Force during the Korean War, not as a disruption, but as the continuation leading to Reconstruction, highlighting its war legacy aspect. We examine how the destruction caused by the bombing during the Korean War influenced urban reconstruction policies and spatial structure. Furthermore, we conduct the detailed analysis of the bombing pattern in Pyongyang and explore the utilization of the war legacy in the remaining urban space. As a result, we observed that certain areas in Pyongyang were left undamaged, strategically managed, while while uh, while new urban reconstruction plan concentrate on the area that suffered destruction. The bombing carried out by the U.S. Air Force in North Korea during the Korean War, despite the principle of strategic bombing, resulted in widespread civilian casualties and expensive urban destruction. Due to changes in bombing principles based on the progress of the war. When we focus on Pyongyang, despite the indiscriminate bombing by the U.S. Air Force, many areas in Pyongyang, especially in the north part of the city, where there was relatively less urban infra, remained affected because the bombing were concentrated near industrial, transportation, and military facilities, unlike South Korea, which designed Busan as the temporary capital. North Korea was able to retain Pyongyang as its capital because it maintains its administrative system in this area despite the war. The non-bombed area of Pyongyang were common only those were government office, industrial facilities, and transportation infra were not located. Hence, they were not selected as bombing targets. Type A is a case where a new building is constructed to maintain the exhibition administrative system and utilize the space. It is currently also referred to as the anti-US village and the Revolution Historical Site. Type B is a case where housing or buildings are utilized in space unaffected by bombing to establish a prisoner of war camp or refuge camp. Type C refers to a situation where essential good market or school are established in space where there was no urban infra but residential area were developed. Through such strategic spatial utilization, North Korea was able to proceed with urban reconstruction efforts even during the war. From the late 1950s, plan for the reconstruction of Pyongyang as a whole began to be drawn up. The urban reconstruction plan was led by architect Kim Jong-hee, who had been studying in the Soviet Union and returned to North Korea. The initial draft was completed in early 1951. However, the reconstruction plan for Pyongyang draft in 1951 had to be modified according to the pattern of the bombings. As a result, the focus shifts to area heavily affected by bombings, leads to the complexion of a new urban plan different from the initial draft. The content you are currently viewing in the PowerPoint presentation pertains to the urban planning effort undertaken in Pyongyang at the time. Although there appear to be very detailed plan outlined in 1951, with a few exceptions, most of it was not implemented. Chapter 4 sheds light on the process of restructuring Pyongyang as the capital city during the post-war reconstruction period. Based on the analysis of the two revised myths, it examines how Pyongyang was reconstructed as the capital following its destruction and discuss the significance of the term democratic capital that emerged after the Korea War. Furthermore, it explored the spatial discontinuity resulting from the creation of central or symbolic space according to national policies and as well as the spatial continuity inherent in other areas. As previous noted, North Korea drafted the Pyongyang Reconstruction Plan in 1951, outlining a blueprint for urban planning. However, immediate implementation was hindered after the armistice agreement due to the need for adjustment to align with economic plan. Even after revisions to the plan, noticeable progress in Pyongyang's urban reconstruction project was not evident until 1954. This delay was primarily attributed to the lack of smooth production from construction material at the time. Some urban reconstruction projects undertaken in 1953 relied heavily on assistance from the Soviet Union and China and East Bloc countries, while Germany also provided assistance for Pyongyang's reconstruction. Their aid was predominantly focused on the Hamhung region. Based on this assistance in 1955, the Pyongyang City Restoration Committee was issued, setting specific conservation goals and completion deadline. At this time, the constrained construction target included the space that continued to symbolize North Korea. Today, Kim Il-sung Square and Near Street, which is now known as Seungri Street. The area around Kim Il-sung Square and Seungri Street was planned based on the criteria of the Pyongyang Reconstruction and Construction General Plan, which was spearheaded by Kim Il-sung. His advocated components for the city center align closely with the present-day symbolic element. Upon closer examination, it becomes apparent that the configuration of this component bear a striking resemblance to the area in front of Gwanghwamun Square, also known as Sejongno in Seoul, indicating a significant similarity between the two locations. Examining the design process of Kim Il-sung Square in detail reveals that, rather than socialist elements, greater consideration was given to the unique characteristic of the space and the urban composition of Pyongyang at the time. In particular, it is noted that there were several revisions to the design plan for Kim Il-sung Square with extensive discussions regarding the connection point between the square and the Taedong River, the location of the 인민대 학생당, and the design the buildings. Next, Stalin Street, aka now Seungri Street, which is now known Seungri, connects to the central square and extend further to connect Moranbong Park and the Central Grand Theater. Now Pyongyang Grand Theater. Construction of this street was carried out under the basic condition that it should be 45 meters wide to facilitate in functions. Kim Il-sung Square and Stalin Street were completed before Liberation Day ceremony on August 15. August 15 is Korea Liberation Day. Through this, the new space with the unique scenery and sense of place was created in Pyongyang, which has been maintained as symbolic space to this day. As you can see in the photo, the appearance of military parade in 1950s and the present day is remarkably similar. During the crucial post-war Reconstruction period, when economic recovery and growth were paramount, North Korea lacks the capacity to implement new urban planning initiatives. As evidenced by a newly formed residential district, it's apparent that many of these areas were previously developed as residential sites during the Japanese colonial era. This continuity of space can be also be observed through the distribution of industrial facility. Comparing the locations of factories in 1945 and their current position, it's evident that there haven't been significant changes. In other words, during the post-war reconstruction process, North Korea, due to economic and political challenges, had to prioritize certain areas for urban planning, with Kim Il-sung Square being chosen and a priority for restoration and planning. As a result, other areas fell under the logic of exclusion, maintaining spatial continuity. Chapter 5, we will explore how powerful central authority influence urban development, particularly in the context of the capital city. We will examine the impact of the strong central power on the spatial dynamics, focused on the myth of Pyongyang speed that emerging from the urban construction process. This myth goes beyond mere achievement and holding significant in terms of North Korea's unique social system, which include the mobilization system, effort competition, and reward system such as the model commendation, all of which are associated with the Cholima work team movement during the 5 years economic plan. As the economic plan progressed, Kim Il-sung adopted assembly construction based on the principle of standardization of design, mechanization of construction, and industrialization of building materials, which have been advocated for. In early 1950s, a permanent meeting of construction activities was convened in Pyongyang to resolve to save budget and construction materials and to begin researching more cost-effective construction method and building material production. Before 1958, urban development outside of the central space was not a priority, and construction methods were not significantly different from those used during the Japanese colonial era. However, with the introduction of a prefabricated construction method in 1958, the time required for constructing changed, and research for more efficient housing construction became more active. As a result, standardized design were introduced not only for urban planning but also for housing and public facility design. In the field of building material production, concrete block factories were established in Pyongyang to increase production capacity. Furthermore, lightweight concrete using ash was researched and developed to minimize the use of limestone. Efforts were also made to organize the open air site for the production of concrete components directly and construction site. In terms of construction method, various techniques were researched, but the use of crane for assembly type construction of block was found to be the most suitable and widely utilized. The Pyongyang speed, which North Korea continues to emphasize as an achievement of a post-war Reconstruction period, was the result of the complex interplay between technological advancement and pressure the tangible result. However, the brilliant achievement also brought about side effects. Pressure for speed and performance soon lead to issues regarding quality. Therefore, from 1959 onwards, concerns about improving the quality of buildings began to emerge. In socialist construction, the emphasis on increasing speed was based on the innovation of technology and the ideological struggle and mobilization of workers, which resulted in the complex outcome known as the Pyongyang speed. completing the first apartment building in just 14 minutes. As spatial restructuring took place, urban development projects that uh, prioritize speed, becoming integrated with the Cholima work team movement, which was based on mobilizing labor, ultimately resulting in the early completion of the goal and task of the 5-year economic plan. In this process, a new architecture style called modern Joseon architecture was implemented in public facility accessible to all people in Pyongyang. The modern Joseon architecture style was a reinterpretation of the social realism used in socialist countries, but adapted to North Korean sensibilities. Representative example of the modern Joseon architecture are the Pyongyang Grand Theater and the Ongnu Hall, both characterized by their 팔짝 roof. It looks like a triangle. These two buildings not only reflect the architecture style of North Korea style modern architecture, but also embody the overall social atmosphere of North Korea during the period of People Economy 5-year plan. They encapsulate not only the speed oriented aspect of construction, but also the significance of labor mobilization through initiative not like the Cholima work team movement within the context of North Korea overall societal ambience at the time. Therefore, summarizing how we will perceive Pyongyang through today's lecture, from the immediate aftermath of liberation, when it assumed the role of capital, Pyongyang was shaped through the long-term perspective encompassing modern urban planning. The establishment of North Korea War and Reconstruction. It was formed through the interaction of the economic and political influence of socialist countries, particularly led by the Soviet Union. The material and human legacies left by Japan and the internal process of regime establishment in North Korea. In other words, Pyongyang's locality cannot be generalized solely by the ideologies of socialism. Instead, it emerged as a complex historical product layered with the physical legacy left by history. The agent of urban planning and the evolution, the technology in the implementation of urban planning. This lecture aimed to acknowledge the multifaceted nature of Pyongyang's locality and its formation through historical legacies, the agent of urban planning, and the evolving technologies in urban planning implementation. Thank you for attending to the lecture so far. Thank you.